As a result of last Saturday's by-elections across states in Nigeria, results have continued to emerge, and major political parties like the All Progressives Congress (APC), the People's Democratic Party (PDP), and the New Nigeria People's Party (NNPP) have retained control in their strongholds. However, INEC halts voting in states like Kano, Enugu, Akwa Ibom, Plateau State over issues of disruption while police arrest offenders. The rerun elections conducted in some states on Saturday in about 26 states of the Federation were characterized by violence, vote buying, ballot snatching, disruptions, and of course, low voter turnout. And reactions have continued to trail last Saturday's by-elections in Nigeria. And joining us, of course, to lend a voice to this is Nelson Ekujimi, political analyst from Lagos. Nelson, thank you for your time.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. Nelson, let's start off with what you think about last Saturday's by-elections, across 26 states in Nigeria. I know that News Central practically followed it all through. And one thing that stood out for us was in quite a number of places, it was mostly low voter turnout, amongst other issues. But for you, how would you rate the elections?
Well, I would rate the elections as successful, even though we recognize that in some places it was marked by violence. And if you take an overview of the election generally, you know that in most places out of the 26 states, it went smoothly, even though the general view out there was that the voters' turnout was very, very low. So for me, it was a successful election by all standards. INEC came to the election units or polling stations as requested by law or as required by law. But some of the stakeholders, like in their character, they showed their true color once again. And in some of those places, INEC had to cancel the elections where they observed, those anomalies. But if you ask me, I think it was a fair election, only that it tells us clearly at the end of this exercise that we have to go back to the drawing board.
I'm sorry, Nelson, to cut in here. Part of your opening remark, you said it was a successful election by all standards.
Yeah, I said so. I said so. When you
Why
have
is that?
Elections
where all of the issues being experienced on that day?
Pardon?
I said, how can you, how would you justify, in what context would you put the word successful? We saw issues of vote buying, we saw a bit of violence, we also saw a situation where people didn't even come out to vote, as anticipated in many areas. So on what premises would you say it was successful?
The premise on which I base my description of the word successful is based on the outcome of the elections generally. If you take a statistics of these 26 states, at least you'll be sure that in over 18 states, election went on smoothly. And, stakeholders involved attested to it via physical observation and media reportage, because we saw media talking to voters as well as electoral officers, observers, and even the voters. And if you can score 18 out of 26 or maybe 20 out of 26, I wonder what that grade will be other than a B plus, if not an A. So for me, that is the basis for which I rated that successful. The elections, like in our climb here, it's a voluntary responsibility by the voters. If 1 million people are registered on the voters register and they have their PVC, if it is only 2 people that came out to vote, that is an expression of the will of the people. So long as the votes of those 2 is what counted, and without being manipulated. So that, by our standard, that means successful. If the party agents were there, if the electoral umpire was there, if the electorate came out, no matter in their numbers, and the outcome reflected the voting pattern. So for me, that means it was successful. It's not until everybody comes there that you determine with the successfulness of an election.
So for you, irrespective of the little glitches here and there, I mean, according to your analysis, in spite of it all, it was successful. We showed you footage on the screen just a while ago, happenings in Enugu State, where we know that quite a lot of drama did happen, and it was part of the states where INEC actually did suspend elections due to some anomaly recorded. There were also issues too in states like Plateau, where the PDP, that's a party, was not part of the parties on the ballot papers. So, I mean, you talked about stakeholders, some of which, according to you, did misbehave and they were put in their place. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, what I mean is that, the electoral system encompasses various stakeholders. You talk about INEC, you talk about the security agencies, you talk about the electorate, you talk about the political parties, you talk about observers, you talk about the media. So every stakeholder has a role to play. And if you take a general statistics of the election in 26 states, and you find disruptions or anomalies in maybe 4 or 5 out of 26, that means INEC has the election has a pass mark of maybe 20 or 21 states. And don't forget, these are elections that took place in maybe 1 or 2 constituencies in a state. Take, for example, in Lagos, it took place in only 1 constituency, that's the Surulere 1 federal constituency. You take a state like Oyo State. In Oyo State, I think it was just about 1 or 2. You take states like Ondo, the by-election took place in just 1 constituency, federal constituency. So if you take an overview, statistically, how many constituencies did this election take place? How many got the pass mark? How many were disrupted? By all standards, you don't expect to have a perfect elections. Don't forget that.
But sorry, Nelson, to cut in here. Compared to what we saw in 2023, I mean, the general elections that happened, and what we witnessed on Saturday in Nigeria, would you say in terms of coordination, in terms of logistics, in terms of arrangement and organization, particularly on the part of the umpire, talking about INEC, would you say there was an improvement of some sort, right? Did INEC really learn from the mistakes of 2023 general elections to improve on what we saw during the by-elections on Saturday? I'm talking about not just INEC alone, including the security apparatus, the security forces. Was there an improvement?
Well, it is incomparable because you can't compare when you have elections. The old elections for these by and rerun elections, I'm not sure we had up to 50,000 polling units. The general election, we had 176,000 plus polling units, almost 177,000. So I don't know how I can compare 177,000 to maybe 20,000 polling units. It's incomparable. But be that as it may, in some of the places we saw, and they came on time. The security agencies were also on ground. Where there was violence, INEC was able to do the needful. You recollect in the declaration of results, the returning officer said they cancelled results due to overvoting. They cancelled results because elections was disrupted. So some of the stakeholders have refused to learn. And it is for us to have a discussion, how do we get around this recurring decimal with regards to our election?
So are you saying that INEC has the capacity to instead, are you saying INEC is better placed to conduct elections maybe on a small scale compared to, with higher margin of success compared to maybe on a large scale like the general elections that involves the entire nation? Hence, INEC might not be properly qualified or have the capacity to do such. Is that what you're saying?
No, that is not what I'm saying. INEC has the capacity.
Okay.
No, you are making a comparison. Capacity is different from comparison.
How is it different? Because it's the same body. It's still the same umpire.
Yes, but in this election, we have, from reports we have gathered, Hardly can we find any state where it was reported that INEC had logistics problem. In 2023 general elections, even though INEC had some logistics problem, INEC still had a success rate. The results are out there in the public domain. But for you to compare, it's like comparing the World Cup where you have countries of the world that have played qualifying series from continents with a local league. It's incomparable. Let us be honest with ourselves, because for you to qualify to the final stage of the tournament, you must have passed through qualifying series, and what have you. So it is not for us to compare the general elections where you had the whole country, involved, and an election where Lagos State, for example, has 57.
Nelson, are you there?
States. And when you look at other states, other 25 states, because Lagos is one, we had these elections in 26 states of the federation. What I'm saying is that you cannot compare the conduct of the 2023 elections with this one. It's incomparable, because at the 2023 general election was on a larger scale. These are just, off-cycle, minute elections. But be that as it may, we saw that INEC played its role creditably. But some of the stakeholders, don't forget, elections is not only conducted by INEC. Once the other stakeholders don't have a buy-in to the elections will be unsuccessful. If people come to the polling stations and they say they are not voting, there's nothing INEC can do. INEC will only put up it box, paste the voters register, place it on the table, paste it on the wall. If the voters say they are not voting, is INEC going to thumbprint? No, absolutely no. INEC does not have the power to do that. It is the electorate. So for the success of every election, the role of every stakeholder is important, and they need to play that role.
Okay, let's talk about voter turnout during the by-elections. Generally, we had our reporters too on ground who said that it was pretty much not as expected. Particularly, I remember having a conversation with one of our reporters, in the wee hours of the morning, concerning the goings on in some parts in Delta State, where he said it was anticipated that about 1,000 people would come out to vote in that particular, word. But towards the end, at least while I had the conversation, they could barely even boast of, as at then, maybe 50. So I just want to know, what do you think, might have been responsible for the largely recorded low voter turnout across many of the polling stations? Your take.
A lot of factors can be adduced for that, but majorly, it shows that our role as a society with regards to voters' education and sensitization, we have scored very, very low. We have done poorly. And again, it shows you clearly the mindset of a lot of our people. People only attach importance to elections when it concerns the presidential election or the governorship election. If you ask a lot of the voters, they don't know the name of the candidates on the ballot papers for these constituencies, either at the state level or at the federal level. So what do you expect where people put all their focus? Presidency. If a man does not have water in his house, it is the president that is responsible. If a man, fights with his wife, it is the governor that is not doing his job. So it shows you clearly that with regards to voters' education and sensitization, we are not doing well at all. It shows that we don't understand what democracy is all about, that the councillor is as important as Mr. President. The local government chairman is as important as the governor of his state. So people are assuming that it is just the House of Assembly, it's just the House of Reps. I won't go out to vote. If it was the presidency, I would be interested. It tells you clearly that with regards to education and sensitization on democracy and voting rights, that we are still far behind.
But don't you think also lack of trust, particularly in the capacity of the umpire to conduct, well, I use the word credible elections, must have also contributed to people not coming out too? Because, I mean, part of the conversations when you ask, people say, well, they already know what they want to vote for. The results are pretty much out there. Do you think people have trust in the system?
People, yes, I agree with you. People don't have trust in the system because they are absolutely ignorant. Somebody expects that if I'm supporting candidate A, that if I go to the polling station and I vote for candidate A, if I alone voted for candidate A, if 20 people voted for candidate B, then as far as I'm concerned, the election was rigged. That is stupidity. That shows you the ignorance. People don't know. People just sit in their house, in their comfort zones, and peddle all sorts of allegations. Oh, whoever will win. Who told you that? If whoever will win is how election pans out, why are we always complaining about vote buying? It shows you clearly that those who lack of trust in the system don't understand how the system operates, and it is our responsibility to educate them. I've had a lot of people say that, and I've tried. We are at our own little level. We have tried to educate them that look, we have moved beyond that level. It's you that needs to come into the bus and join the moving train for a better Nigeria. Sitting down, you ask, oh, they already know who will win. Who told you that? We have look at in Akwa Ibom State, for example, the YPP won about 2 states of federal constituencies. Who would have thought that would happen? So when people sit down in their homes or in their offices and say, "Oh, whoever will win," says who? Whoever will win will be dependent on the people's vote. The era of writing election outcome in an office or manipulating it anyway is long gone. Because
you said the era of so I mean, if I'm just to get you correctly, you are saying that gradually Nigeria is phasing away from the era of election manipulation. Is that really the reality?
The reality is that the era of manipulating results is thinning out. Thinning out. Before, let me inform our viewers. Under former President Olusegun Obasanjo, you saw what happened. His predecessor had to admit elections was written by the electoral umpire then under Professor Morisiwu. But now you can't find that any longer. You need a PVC, you need a BVAS. If the BVAS does not authenticate the voters, then that election is as good as not being held. You saw places where BVAS was bypassed and the elections was cancelled. What does that tell us? Was that the case in the past? In the past, you have 500 people on the voters register and 510 people will vote. But now you just mentioned a place where about 1,000 voters were there, only 50 was able to vote. What does that tell you? It tells you clearly that those manipulations at some levels have been completely eliminated. If you don't have a PVC, you can't vote. If the VIVAS does not accredit you, you cannot vote. So what are we talking about? And areas where you manipulate, the electoral umpire will fish you out. Where the number of declared results far outnumbers the number of accredited voters on the BVAS machine, it's as good as the election didn't hold there. And we also have a system today where BVAS machine is configured for each polling unit. Polling unit A has a BVAS machine that you cannot take to polling unit B. It will not work. And if you take a polling unit B BVAS machine to polling unit D, it will not work there. Then you have a system today where ballot papers for polling unit A is different from polling unit C. All these are measures that have been put in place by INEC to correct anomalies because, elections are conducted by human beings, and human beings always look for shortcuts. It is natural. Like we are made to understand even in the Bible that sin is man's second nature. Man will always want to take the easy way out. But at every point in time, as a people, as a system, you have to fashion out, measures to curtail, the greediness, the mischief of the human being. So if anybody is saying we are still where we were in 1999 to 2007, then I believe that person is an Alice in Wonderland. Okay,
I want to come in here briefly. You talked about the beavers. Now, this morning on the breakfast program on News Central, we had Dr. Yunisad, that's Tanko, of course, a key figure within the Labour Party, who, of course, he said quite a number of things, but I'll need your reaction on this. He said that some of the officials did not have the enough or sufficient technical knowledge. That's talking about the officiating officials, talking about INEC, about how to operate some of the machines they were given. Do you think, number one, when it comes to recruitment of personnel, particularly for elections like this, we have ad hoc, INEC staff. Do you think that sufficient training is given to them to operate and also manage, the electioneering, within their constituency, within their ward, and to be able to, of course, deliver credible elections, and results to the national body? And also, do you also think that INEC should actually, adopt the idea of ad hoc staff, or rather maintain permanent, staffs that, go through training, retraining, they understand the system, and it's not just when it's time for elections, you bring in people and you give them a crash course. Some of them are not able to keep up, and then you have technical issues. Nelson, did you get that?
With regards to elections in Nigeria, it is impossible for INEC. Pardon?
Please go ahead.
With regards to elections in Nigeria, it is impossible for INEC to have permanent staff for the numbers we require for an election on a permanent basis, because elections are held every 4 years. So what will the persons you have employed be doing within a tenure of almost 3 and 8 months before election, or almost 4 years before election? They will just be collecting salaries, and the state cannot afford that amount of money. So we'll continue to do with ad hoc staff. But most importantly speaking now, I've been involved in elections in monitoring in Nigeria, observation in Nigeria since 1999. You talked about the Yunusa Tanko. This was the same Yunusa Tanko whom, after the presidential election in February 25, 2023, came out and said that they won in over 900,000, they had over 9,000 polling units victory in Lagos. And when they went to the election petition tribunal, you are very much aware that the tribunal in its judgments said this is a party that claimed to have deployed 133,000 party agents as required by law, and throughout the trial, the party never presented one result sheet of its agents to substantiate its slogan of INEC rigged the election. Not one result. You deployed 133,000 party agents. You yourself claim that. And in fighting your own case, that you were cheated, you cannot even produce one to disclaim INEC results. So when people like Yunusa Tanko comes out to speak, I think we need to remind Nigerians too, when Nigerians come out to speak, people should look at the antecedents. What have they said in the past? Yunusa Tanko is condemning INEC, just like they condemned INEC immediately after the 2023 general election, and we're even calling for a military takeover. So you want me to take somebody like Yunusa Tanko serious? Absolutely, I won't do that.
All right, let's move to, of course, the future right now. We know that the elections, in some states, the results have been declared, but right now we are seeing a trend whereby there's the voting, people casting, the votes at the ballots, and then INEC declaring the results, and then opposition going to the courts, tribunal level, Supreme Court level, and all of that. So, and then the courts upturning some of these decisions and eventually presenting a winner. So it's now the judiciary versus the results of INEC, which of course technically should translate to the mandate of the people, right? So I would just want to know your reaction. We are beginning to see the incursion of the judiciary in the electoral process, and it seems to be overshadowing lately. So what's your take?
My take is that if we say the judiciary should not adjudicate in a dispute, how do we resolve disputes? Even marriages, by law, if you are dissatisfied with a marriage you have contracted between a man and a woman, you take it to court to adjudicate. The role of the courts for our education and information is to interpret the law. INEC responsibility is to conduct elections according to law. And where INEC has been found wanting not to have complied with the law, the courts do the needful. The judiciary does not just wake up and say, oh, remove this person. The judiciary must have been convinced beyond reasonable doubt. So how can you say because the judiciary is doing its job, then somebody who is supposed to do his job has failed to do it properly and the judiciary has come in to correct it, then the correcting agency should be thrown away? Absolutely not, except you want a society in chaos. You want anarchy. So long as elections are conducted we have seen elections taken to courts, and the courts have found the validly declared winner. It's because that process followed the law. The judiciary does not have any other document with which to interrogate elections other than the electorate and the constitution. So if the stakeholders in the adjudication to the courts, and the court now does its job, is that anything wrong? Is there anything wrong with that? You see, I think the time has come for us, Nigerians, to be careful, and even Africa. Just recently in Democratic Republic of Congo, when the opposition were losing the elections, they were calling for cancellation. I was aghast, and I was on a medium, and I told people that this is akin to what happened in Nigeria. If immediately you subscribe to the electoral system, you have also subscribed to the judicial interpretation in it. So you cannot, along the way, when it is not going along your own thinking, be calling for a total cancellation. That was the same thing they did in Nigeria. It has become the fashion of opposition to cry foul when they are losing. Why can't opposition have faith and say, okay, if you cheat me, I will go to court? We have seen situations where parties and candidates have been cheated on election day, and they go to court and their mandate is restored. What is wrong with that? But all right, this attitude of, if I don't win, let us bring everything down, must be condemned.
All right, let's talk about the security management during this particular elections. Well, to be quite honest, to some extent, we saw some arrests that were made during this particular polls, and the gallantness of some of the security personnel, particularly in some areas, came to the fore. But I want to know your general overview as regards the deployment of security, particularly when it comes to electioneering in Nigeria. Would you say that there's an improvement?
Well, absolutely. Over the years, there has been improvements in the deployment of security agencies for elections. But most importantly, a lot of these arrests, we don't get to hear about the prosecution. Even from the last 23 general elections, the suspects that were arrested by the security agencies, we are yet to hear of the trial in court. And as much as one wants to commend the security agencies for the tireless job they are doing, to keep us safe before, during, and after elections, I think it builds on us, to go back and continue to advocate for the setting up of the Electoral Offences Commission, to handle this aspect of our electoral process. Maybe if we're able to do this, it will go a long way in restoring sanity to the number of electoral abuse we witness on elections, because it has become a recurring decimal. Some people have taken it as a business, to disrupt elections. I remember before now, it was a big business, but with the technological innovation by the electoral empire, that business is thinning out. But we still have pockets of these characters in this unlawful business, and it is our duty as Nigerians to continue to look for ways in which we can improve our electoral process, so that if they will come, we can even deploy Boy Scouts or Girls Brigade to mount our polling stations. We don't need to, waste resources deploying trained policemen who are trained, to combat civil disturbance, to go and police elections. I think that is a misuse of resources of the state, because if you know the amount and the number of men and women we deploy for elections when elections come, you know definitely this is something that we need to sit down and have a rethink. I was, for example, I was in Kogi State for the gubernatorial elections last year, and I can tell you, while traveling to Kogi State, I saw policemen coming who were in buses coming from Ogun State, from Edo State. These are policemen that are supposed to provide security in Ogun State. But when you move such a large number of security agencies from across the country to come and police elections, their primary responsibility, what will happen to it? So it's not something we should continue to believe we should go along this route. We need to have a change of heart, need to adopt new methods to make our elections, violence-free.
All right, Nelson, still staying on that. There have been also calls that Nigeria's, will I call it, election season or electioneering should be unified. So we don't have by-elections, runoff elections. The dates need to sort of synchronize, number one, because it's cost-effective, and then number two, for a proper political calendar. Do you also share that line of thought?
No, I don't share that line of thought. The way the calendar is the way it's running constitutionally. If elections has been conducted in a constituency and the courts have found it, not in substantial compliance, don't forget, the law does not say total compliance. The law says substantial compliance, because the law recognizes.
Sorry, substantial compliance, or in what context?
Substantial. That's what the Electoral Act says, the Constitution. Substantial. So long as where you have infraction is not enough to affect the outcome, is in minute areas, then the election is as good as good. So what we are saying here is that elections that we have had that that are not uniform are as a result of interpretation of the law, not interpretation of anybody. If the election was conducted in a state, a gubernatorial election, and in the dissatisfied party goes to court, and the courts find out that, the election was not conducted in substantial compliance with the Electoral Act, and the court orders a fresh election, and a fresh election comes up, even if the incumbent has spent 1 year already, are you saying the new man should be deprived of his 4-year tenure, that his 4-year tenure should be reduced to 3 years because somebody has taken 1 year of what rightly belongs to him? It's like telling a man who has a property, whose property has been stolen, to allow the thief to go away with whatever he or she has stolen. No, that is injustice. So there's no way we can harmonize the calendar as it is. The way the calendar even allows for proper policing, so that we know that when election, look, for example, when the 2023 general elections was held, some states didn't have gubernatorial elections. I can mention them to you. States like Edo, Ondo, Kogi, Osun, Imo. They didn't have Bayelsa. They didn't have gubernatorial elections. So it allowed, in fact, when you have such disruptions or such demarcation in the system, it allows for proper monitoring. For example, if you were with us in Kogi, Kogi and Imo, the eyes of the whole world was focused on those two states, and Bayelsa, on those 3 states. And so it allowed for proper mobilization of resources and monitoring, unlike when everybody is doing it at the same time. So if, due to human errors, we have this demarcation, we'll continue to run along with it because that is what the Constitution of Nigeria says, except if we decide that come maybe 2027, don't forget, Edo and Ondo will be going to the polls this year. A governor elected in Ondo and Edo has a tenure under our constitution for 4 years. So maybe in your wisdom, you want to abridge their 4-year tenure to 2 years, then you have the law to contend with, because they'll be forced to go to court to ask for an interpretation. And you can be rest assured that the court will interpret the law that the law says he has a 4-year tenure. 4 years does not begin in 2024 and end in 2026. I don't know which calendar in the world will describe a 4-year tenure as 2024 to 2026. A 4-year tenure from 2024 will terminate in 2028. So the way the calendar is, we can run with it so long as we are doing the right thing. It should not be anybody's problem. What we should be concerned about is how well we are doing. Whether election is conducted in January for Apapa local government and conducted in December for Kara and Amoda local government, what we should be concerned is the election in Apapa and the one in Akwa Ibom, Amoda and Ogbomoso, are they conducted in substantial compliance with the law? If that be it, so we should run with it. Why are we in a hurry that want to merge everything? Even God has not merged the world. We are in the evening today now in Lagos. In America, they are just waking up.
Okay, China, I mean, Nelson, you're
so why don't you tell God to merge the whole world together and at the same time?
Interesting, but Nelson, I mean, your analogy pretty much interesting. But I would like you to take you back to something you said, which for me I think is pretty pivotal. You talked about voter sensitization. You said that quite a number of voters are ignorant, and you said a lot of sensitization needs to go, into number one, the screening of candidates, the importance of elections itself, and also maybe on some national policies, right? I would like you to please expand more on that. And how do you feel this can be further expanded, particularly talking about the dragnet of sensitization, particularly at the grassroots level? Because when you also do your research, you'll find out that the bulk of those that come out to vote are usually the market women, the market men, people at the bus stops, garages, car parks and all. They're the ones who are most of the time recruited, to come out to vote. Unfortunately, the learned ones would rather, unfortunately, which is many would rather sit behind their, keypads and then comment on social media or maybe their television screens for whatever reason. But what do you think can be done, to further sensitize people on the importance, not just to vote, but to also vote rightly?
I think what can be done is a collective exercise, and it will involve us, bringing on board civic education at all levels of our life, even in our religious and traditional institutions. You talked about the market men and women, the ordinary man on the street who go out to the polls to vote, or like, the elites. But most importantly, a lot of times, if you have been a practitioner on the field, have to be induced to go out. If they don't know the reason why they are voting, that is why they have to be induced. That's why they have to be mobilized. Ordinarily, on my own part, I will know that, we have just had an election in 2023. There will be another election in 2027. I must be preparing my mind. Who will I vote? Who will I vote for? It is not. I've been an election observer over the years, and it saddens me. You get to the polling station, you see an elderly man like yourself coming to the polling station, looking left, looking right, looking for which party agent to tell him to come and collect. Collect what? What can you collect for 4 years of your life or the life of your children? So we need civic education. We need to make people understand why they vote. A lot of persons don't understand why they vote. That is why somebody will sit down in his house and we say, okay, when you vote, if it has started, come and tell me. I leave my house as early as 6:30 a.m. to monitor polling units, to watch the streets. So does Nigeria does Nigeria belong to only Ekujimi? No, it belongs to all of us. So we need to have this education and sensitization at every step, even from nursery and primary school. Let's start imbibing it in our children so that they don't become like this generation of ours, who have to be pushed to do everything, to be pushed to do what is right for yourself. So it's a responsibility that we all owe the society. Children in nursery school secondary school, tertiary institutions, in our religious institutions. It's a job we all have to have a buy into. So if you talk about the elites, they always know that the masses will come and vote. But before the masses will come and vote, somebody has to push them. Why must they on election? I've been witness to elections, and on election day you see party employ canvassers. They go house to house to go and lure people to come out and vote. Why should they do that? It's your right. If you are voting, you are not voting for me. I vote about my future as Nestle. Could you vote for your own future as well? Why must I be the one to come and lure you?
Sorry, let's compartmentalize this. Do you think agencies of government like the National Orientation Agency is doing enough? Or even maybe, the PR arm of INEC is doing enough to actually, not just on season, but even off season, sensitize people?
Like we say, money is the vehicle of evangelism. NOA and INEC publicity department, what is the resources we have voted for them to carry out this responsibility? And how many places can they reach? This responsibility of educating and sensitizing our people on democracy, on electoral matters, it's a responsibility we all owe the society. Just like we are doing on this station now, we are sensitizing Nigerians. You are not being paid by INEC or by government agency. You are playing your own part. So let everybody in their little corner start the sensitization. In your CDA, start it. In your market association, do it. In your family town union, do it. Let people be asking one another. Have you voters registration has started? Have you gotten your PVC? Your son is 17. He will be 18 next year. Make sure he gets registered. That is the only way we can up the ante. But if we want to wait on INEC and agencies of state, I can tell you for free, they don't have the capacity, to do it alone. They need the collaboration. They need the support of other stakeholders. And those other stakeholders are Nigerians.
Well, Nelson, before I let you go, you talked about something very salient. You talked about vote buying. And unfortunately, we also saw part of it play out even in these by-elections. In the 2023 general elections, in spite of the efforts of the government then to sort of curb it, we still saw a bit of it happen. What do you think it can ever, end in Nigeria's electoral process?
Even in America, I remember recently a legislator was charged to court for voters' inducement. Vote buying is not exclusive to Nigeria, so don't let us put Nigeria in the bad light. But the truth of the matter is that what vote buying has come out to show clearly is that today the voters are king. It is the voters that determine the outcome of elections. That is why somebody will vote money to buy their votes. But most importantly, if we have enough of voters' education and sensitization, the voter will know that whatever I'm getting on the day of election cannot suffice for 4 years of my life. That is very important. For you to assume, or for me to assume that we can never have an end to vote buying, my brother, that is impossible. Some persons on their own will make the votes, inducers, bring out the money to induce them, because they will tell them, if you don't give me money, at least you must be conversant with that language. If you don't give me money, I'm not voting for you. If you don't give me something,
all right,
that
Nelson.
is some people's character.
All right, Nelson.
And the politician is always anxious to feed.
All right, Nelson, I'm sorry. I might just need to cut in here. We are pressed for time, but we deeply appreciate your contribution on the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right.